All right, we're going to finish up the First Amendment looking at the freedoms of press, assembly, and petition and how they affect you. All right, so here we go. Okay, so the press is often referred to as the fourth branch of government, and this goes back to that idea of checks and balances. And you see a lot of this with President Trump really being very critical of the press because they're always very critical of him. And you think about what a free press means. A free press is that can be independent, not owned by the government, not responsible to the government. And really, again, think about checks and balances that really, like this cartoon shows, you can do something wrong, and you're going to get it from a nation that has a free press. And again, the United States has always prided itself on having a free press. Actually, even before we were a country during colonial times, many newspapers that were always very critical of those in positions of power and positions of high esteem in the government. So what does the media include? This is a pretty broad brush, and a lot of us get most of our media from the internet, and this is where things start to get a little bit new territory. But traditionally, books, newspapers, TV, radio, and let's kind of look at how these are controlled and not controlled and monitored. Okay, so one of the big key concepts, and you look at this idea here called prior restraint. Okay, the government cannot force any sort of press or media outlet to give them their material before they release it. Censorship before it is published is called prior restraint. Now, this is kind of the foundation of the freedom of press. It can't ban or censor material before it's offensive just because they think it's offensive or going to hurt someone's legacy or be very critical of someone in administration. Okay, so again, the idea here is that the press is supposed to be critical of those in power, and if the government was allowed to read the articles before they were published, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of freedom of the press. Okay, they can, however, limit it if there is a national security issue involved. So, recently with WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden, the NSA contractor, this again going back, long before the internet, during the Vietnam War, the Pentagon Papers being published. And this has been challenged in courts, and basically, if national security classified information is going to be released, they can step in. So again, think about what the harm is going to happen to the country as a whole, and that's where I guess the government can step in with the press. Okay. Also, during trials, there's some kind of most of us aren't going to have any sort of experience with this. They can put in a gag order. So basically, if you are part of a trial, they can basically say you cannot use any sort of, you can't post to the media. Okay. This most recently, there was a man that was on trial with some connection to President Trump, and they put a gag order, and he posted some stuff on Instagram, got in big trouble. Okay. So this is a lot of this about keeping confidential information within a courtroom. Or sometimes if you're on a jury, you can be sequestered. So most famously, the O.J. Simpson trial, their jury was sequestered for over 8 months, which means they were not allowed to watch any sort of media or any press. Couldn't read the newspapers, couldn't read the magazine. This is before the internet. So this, again, is to keep a jury isolated to avoid any accidental information, because when you're on a trial, only the information that's inside the courtroom is supposed to be used as evidence. So these are more technical that come into play with various trials. Okay, other forms that the press is monitored and edited or restricted. Okay, television, the Federal Communications Commission, which regulates TV. Again, you have to provide for a license. The free channels are going to be the most regulated, and the free ones, ABC, NBC, PBS. Okay, generally, you know, the more you pay when you think HBO or you think of Showtime or you know, pay-per-view, the less restricted they're going to be. Okay, so the FCC is what's going to regulate the press through television. The internet, very few restrictions from the government. Okay, again, this is all written in 1789. The internet wasn't even a thought. Okay, advertising, if you're going to use press, something called commercial speech. So Kim Kardashian put out these, she was a spokesperson for Skechers with these wonderful shoes that they advertised would lift your butt muscles. They were making false advertisement claims, and Skechers actually lost a $40 million lawsuit. So if your speech or you're using the press to advertise to make money, it's going to be regulated. Okay, obscenities, offensive material. This is a lot of times regulated. Local communities set their standards. You know, just recently there was an episode of Arthur where Arthur's teacher married his boyfriend, and Alabama public TV said, we're not going to show this episode. So again, this varies from region to region. Okay, but again, the press is a very wide range from most people automatically think newspaper, but now it's social media, and it's TV, and it's internet. It's all over the place. Okay, freedom of assembly. Okay, the right to gather in public places. So a lot of times kids often immediately think, oh, I've never been to a march, I've never been to a protest. It doesn't really impact me. Okay, well, this can really range. You know, in the United States, it is not illegal to be a member of a gang. It is not illegal to be in the Ku Klux Klan or to be a Nazi or to march for abortion rights or against abortion rights. Okay, and this is where, again, we take this for granted. I've had students from, foreign exchange students from Western Europe, and they say, yeah, you cannot be a member of the Nazi Party. You'll go to jail. In the United States, you have the right to assemble in whatever group you want. Again, as long as that group is not going to be causing any sort of violence. Okay, so protests, as long as they are peaceful, they're generally allowed. Okay, government can make rules about when and where they're going to have them. And again, you can form any sort of group. So if you want to be a neo-Nazi group and assemble, you have that right under the First Amendment. Now, times they can step in. Okay, the government could say you have to get a permit. You know, if you want to have this KKK parade, there's public property versus private property. You know, obviously, you know, someone was just saying there was recently there was someone out protesting in front of the high school, and they were on the public sidewalk. Now, again, if they come into the school, that's not going to work. You know, you go in the parking lot, that's not going to work. Private property clearly isn't going to work. Okay. And then there's this other term called a heckler's veto. So basically, if the government feels that this rally is going to lead to a riot or danger, they can step in. So there was most notably a neo-Nazi Hitler group that wanted to have a parade down in a suburb of Chicago that had the highest percentage of Holocaust survivors. And they specifically wanted to march through this community with their Nazi flags and Hail Hitler. And the government stepped in there and said, no, this is going to cause a riot. This is going to cause too much of a disturbance, can lead to violence. So again, a lot of this stuff, you think back to the beginning, you know, my right to swing my fist ends at your face. So yeah, you do have the rights, but they are not absolute. Okay, and this has been invoked different times with the Nazi groups or Ku Klux Klan. So again, you know, peacefully gather. You know, you can't be arrested for the ideas that you have. It's just allowing groups of like-minded people to gather regardless of what they think. And the last one, the petition, being able to ask the government for some sort of change or some sort of response or to criticize the government. Again, this used to be more formal, you know, with sign your name here in this petition. Now you can go to change.org. You can go to the White House petition page. If you can get 100,000 signatures, the White House will come out with an official response. Or even today, you know, this is tweeting at the president or commenting on, you know, politician's Instagram page. These are all ways, again, and all these First Amendment rights are very much intertwined But allowing citizens to petition the government to express change that they want. I mean, our students, there was a staff member who was getting into some trouble, and students rallied together and got over 1,000 signatures to keep this staff member around. So again, a lot of these we just take for granted because we live in the United States. This is just something we always have. But they really, are crucial to having a free democracy. So again, life without freedom of petition, you wouldn't be able to communicate your ideas to your elected officials. Okay. So again, you do not have absolute rights. Okay. And whose rights comes first? The courts will decide, but again, you think about your right to swing your fist ends where my face begins. Okay. So there's a lot of times, people talk about hate speech or this and that. We don't have hate speech unless it's going to lead to a violent riot or something. So again, all these are connected. That wraps up our First Amendment talks, and see you guys later. Bye.